Hey everyone, good morning. For those of you who didn't sleep, hello. I know a lot of us on this video right now did not sleep at all tonight, last night rather. We wanted to start by talking about each of us. What is one quote that we're having in our mind? And sorry, I forgot to welcome Diana, Ed, and Wesley. I did not sleep last night. And the quote that's been on my mind a lot is one of my mom's favorite quotes, which is "Fools rush where angels fear to tread." And what that means to me is that it takes a foolish person like myself and a lot of us to try and do these big audacious goals, flipping Texas. I want to congratulate every fool out there for sticking to it and let's making it happen. And now let's move to some of the other amazing people here to talk about what their quote is. Diana, what's on your mind?
So the quote I was thinking about this morning, which is by Gloria Anzaldúa. She is a queer activist from South Texas, and she wrote, "Caminante no hay puentes, se hace puentes al andar," which means journeyer, a person on a journey. There are no bridges. You make bridges when you walk. So just saying that the clear path to getting what you want isn't always there. Sometimes you have to create it yourself.
That's beautiful. Wesley, how about yourself?
So one quote that I keep thinking about is actually from Barack Obama in his DNC keynote speech in 2004. He said that there's not a liberal America and a conservative America, there's a United States of America. And I think that right now that's something that as the Electoral College numbers are coming in and we're looking at the map, one state's red, one state's blue, it's really important to keep in perspective that people aren't just one state is not completely blue, one state is not completely red. There are Texans, or there are people showing up across the country, even here in Texas. Joe Biden got 5 million votes. And so I think that's something that's important to keep in mind, is that this is an ongoing kind of revolution that we're in right now. And we can't say, oh, those states down in the South, they're all just terrible and nothing's improving there. And that's not the case. The fact of the matter is things are getting better. Our state is not divided by liberals and conservatives, and we need to go into this next presidency. It's looking like Joe Biden is going to win, and he's committed to uniting our country. We need to go into this presidency with that kind of perspective in mind, because otherwise we're just going to become even more and more divided.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great quote. And Ed, how about you?
Yeah, so the quote that's going through my mind this morning after the election is actually from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, at the very beginning, where the adventurer looks at young Indiana Jones and he says, "You lost today, kid. It doesn't mean you have to like it." And then the very next scene is a grown-up Indiana Jones still fighting for the things that he believes in. And I've reminded myself of that quote a lot over the last 12 hours. But also another thing that we've said here at Progress Texas before, which is that, look, the revolution is not going to happen overnight. It's going to happen over time. And the only way for us to keep working towards that, to keep that forward progress, to use a football term, is for us to keep doing the work. And today, Wednesday, the day after the election, is when that work continues. For a stronger, more progressive Texas, our work must continue.
Absolutely. So we know, obviously, the big thing on everyone's mind, the election that happened yesterday, but it didn't actually happen yesterday because we're in election week and we're still waiting for other states to chime in. Wesley, you've been following this pretty closely since probably last night. What are your insights? I think you were talking about Wisconsin before we got live.
Yeah, so I've seen reports, and I think that some news organizations have and some haven't, so we'll see what happens. But folks are saying that they're calling Wisconsin for Joe Biden, which is awesome. And we're also seeing that a lot of states are still waiting for their mail-in ballots to be counted. So like Pennsylvania, Georgia right now. And they're saying that those areas, I think Michigan is looking good for Biden as well. And so as those mail-in ballots come in, we'll see kind of a shift in the count because we know that a majority of them are likely going to be for Biden. That's just been the case in the past, and especially with this year, because Trump basically encouraged his supporters not to vote by mail with all of the rhetoric surrounding it. And so I think we're in a really good place right now, and folks are saying that it's looking really good for Biden. I will say some people are disappointed that we're not saying like we didn't see yesterday and we're not seeing today a kind of wide scale repudiation of Trump. And I think that that's understandable given all the harm that he's caused. You know, we really wanted to have like a clear victory and like sail past this and be like, yes, Joe Biden won. But I think we should look at the numbers, specifically the popular vote, as these absentee ballots continue to be counted. The vote for Joe Biden, like I said, is going to continue to grow, and he's actually going to surpass the 70 million votes cast. And that's more votes than any presidential candidate has received in our nation's history. So I think there is this wide scale repudiation of Trump. It's just the way that our electoral college works. It makes it to where we have to be in this kind of back and forth uncertainty phase until all of the votes are in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the repudiation is going to look different than maybe people expected it to look. And the point is that, like Wesley said, Biden is in a good position right now. Looks like he's going to win this election. And I can't believe I'm going to say this, but the Electoral College is actually going to deliver a bigger mandate for him in the end. I want to talk a little bit about what that looks like in Texas, because I think that a lot of people were looking at Texas as potentially flipping. Obviously, we were too. It's a big theory of change here at Progress Texas, but we have to keep some things in mind that give us a silver lining, give us some hope here. Joe Biden is going to get 5.2 million votes out of Texas. To put that in perspective, with no Democrat, no Republican had ever gotten that many votes until Donald Trump's 5.8 million last night. So I think that is that's an important thing to keep in mind, because that's a big milestone for Democrats and progressives in this state. The other thing to keep in mind is that it really narrowed the gap in Texas to 6 points. As a frame of reference, Hillary Clinton's margin was 9 points. Barack Obama's margin was 12 points. So over time, that is starting to narrow, and it's producing a much more competitive state. The blue counties turned out in a big way for Biden. The swing counties, the suburban swing counties, where Republicans used to enjoy a healthy advantage, has been effectively neutralized over 2 election cycles now. So I know that these aren't the numbers that we want to see tonight, that we wanted to see last night, but for 2 election cycles in a row, really 3, we have seen some forward progress here in Texas. The important thing is for us to keep working towards that. I know it's hard to do. Take a day off, but don't let it get so completely away from us. Things are going in the right direction.
That's amazing. And what I would say is again, looking in Texas at the gains that we're making, and then also staying the course with this presidential election. We keep getting votes as time goes by. Like Wesley was saying, it's the way the Electoral College is working, but it's important to just wait. There's so many mail-in ballots that were sent in, especially because of COVID. For folks that were elderly, this was the right thing to do for a lot of folks to mail in their ballots to stay safe for public health. Now it's important to spread the message that, because every single one of these people count, right? Every single vote has to be counted. And so we just have to stay the course and wait and make sure that democracy happens and that every single vote is counted before any winner is declared.
Yeah, I love that. And speaking of votes being counted, Virginia Elizabeth from Facebook has a question for us. How many mail-in ballots, if any, are left to be counted in Texas? I believe we might have already counted all of them. Is that correct?
I actually don't know the answer to that. Might defer to Wesley.
I also don't know the answer to that. I will say, as far as for the presidential race, it's been called, and I don't think that the mail-in ballots, if there are any left to be counted, I don't think that it's going to change necessarily any results on the statewide level. so I don't know that it's going to make much of a difference, but I think that there are probably still in Texas still ballots to be counted. I don't think they're quite at 100% just yet. And like we said, like all of those ballots do need to be counted because in the local races, maybe House district races, congressional races, even they could potentially make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ed, when you were talking about earlier, one of the quotes that means a lot to you, something you say a lot is that campaigns come and go, but Progress Texas are here to stay. And the journey to flipping Texas, that revolution we're talking about, doesn't happen overnight. But what's important to remember is that even though the campaigns are largely over, groups like ours are still here. And I'd love to hear from you, Dan and Wesley, what are some groups that are still, based in Texas, doing really, really amazing work, who our viewers can look for and learn about and support?
I think right now, especially, that there are two kinds of groups that I think are super important. One of my top favorites, coming from doing a lot of immigration legal work, has always been Raices, being working directly with immigrants across all of Texas. And then besides that, also seeing the huge importance of reproductive rights organizations and abortion rights organizations. So groups like Planned Parenthood Texas Votes, the National Institute for Latina Reproductive Health. I would suggest folks really look into those organizations to support and to see how they can help them out.
Wesley, how about yourself?
Yeah, so we're heading into the legislative session, and I think it's going to be especially important that the organizations that are on the ground doing the work to protect our rights are supported. And so I would say groups like Equality Texas for LGBTQ rights here in the state, and then groups like Diana mentioned, a lot of different repro rights organizations. I would also add NARAL Pro-Choice. They do a ton of work during the legislative session. ACLU of Texas. I know I'm just listing off a lot of organizations, but these organizations are all doing super important work, and they're going to be on the ground during the legislative session, really working to squash bad bills and promote good bills that can really advance our rights here in the state.
And Ed, what about you?
Yeah, there's a couple of groups that Progress Texas has worked very closely with over the years. One of the ones we've worked the closest with is the Texas Freedom Network. If you're not familiar with the Texas Freedom Network, they were established as a group that really works to keep science in schools, science in textbooks. What a great concept. They also work for the separation of church and state, which I think is very important as well. A lot of First Amendment issues over at the Texas Freedom Network. And they're partners of ours in a lot of the work we do in the abortion rights movement. In addition to that, our friends over at Common Cause Texas, which do a lot of voting rights work, great people over there. Again, that's Common Cause Texas. And then a couple others that I'm really fond of, Move Texas, which is very big with voter registration, and then Battleground Texas, which does a lot of field organizing. What we like to say with Battleground Texas and Progress Texas is that Progress Texas works on air campaigns. We do progressive media, and Battleground Texas does the ground campaigns. They're the progressive ground effort. So working together with all these groups that both Wesley and Diana mentioned is only just a part of the progressive ecosystem in this state. And like you said, campaigns come and go. We are in it for the long haul. And your activism cannot start and end with elections. It's like democracy is like a muscle. You have to exercise it to keep it healthy. And in order for that to stay healthy, you've got your electoral work, but then you've also got your legislative advocacy, and then you've got your activism in between. And those three elements are really important to a healthy, thriving democracy here in Texas.
So we're actually getting a question from James O'Day on Facebook. We talked about the presidential election. We talked about Texas overall. He's wondering what happened with at the state legislative level. Do one of you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about the Texas House. So we defended our progress from 2016 and 2018. Unfortunately, we didn't flip the House like a lot of us were hoping for this year. But I think that there's been a lot of discussion about how, because of those gains that we've had over the last few years, I think that the legislators in the Texas House have a little bit more power, a little bit more influence now than they've had in the past. And because we were able to progress or to protect a lot of those races this year going into the legislative session, I think that we're at a really good point, and that folks are fired up for all the different kind of things that we can do with this like influence that we have now. So
that's good to know. Ed, Diana, Wesley, do you have any last message before we sign off for today?
I want to echo what Wesley said about the legislature. Look, we wanted to win more seats. We wanted to flip the legislature. It's so important to remember that Democrats picked up 12 seats in 2018 and picked up 5 seats in 2016 for a net gain of 17 seats in 2 cycles. Holding that was incredibly difficult. And we did spread ourselves thin in Texas trying to get more. But the fact that we have held those numbers now for 3 cycles going is an important thing to keep in mind. In addition to that, we picked up 2 congressional seats in 2018, held both of those seats last night. So while I realize we didn't get everything we wanted in 2020, we held on to everything we had, which is quite an accomplishment here in Texas. And I think it's something that we need to keep in mind. It has everything to do with the resiliency of the progressive movement and the sustainability of what we're doing in this state. And I want you to remember those 2 things, because I think that they're incredibly important for us to keep in the back of our mind. We need to be able to come out of this with strength and resiliency and that sustainability moving forward.
Oh, Dan, you want to say something?
I would just say a couple things is that list that we voted on was so long. Also make sure to check on the folks that were near the bottom here and that aren't really near the bottom in terms of how they affect your daily lives. So your local city council races, school board races, we had so many amazing progressives win in those races. And just check on those and see what amazing gains you made locally. A quick shout out to my friend Alyssa Garza, who won her race in San Marcos, young progressive Latina. That is so amazing in Hays County. And we have wins like that across the state. So just want to remind folks that we have so many great wins locally.
You're absolutely right. And I similarly, I want to give a shout out to Tiffany Harrison, who's now going to be on the school board in Round Rock ISD. There's a lot of these wins are all across the state. As Ed said, we've made tremendous progress over the past few years, and that didn't disappear, right? That's still there. Groups like Progress, groups like Move Texas, Battleground Texas, we're all still in the state. We're going to keep working with you to make sure that our state becomes what it can be, a progressive place for everyone, to bring equality, to bring justice. And remember, as Wesley told us, the election's not over yet. So don't stress out too much. Try and take a little bit of a chill today, because last night was, pretty crazy. But the election's not over yet. We need to make sure that every single vote is counted. We're going to be working on that. Put those good vibes into the universe, and let's see what happens this election week. Thank you all for coming. We'll see you soon. Have a good one.